It's hard enough getting motorists out of their cars onto the trains. Imagine how difficult it is persuading industry to put its goods on the railways. He's wrong.
Yeah, but it is government policy, Adrian, and we've come along to this transport group at Selby in Yorkshire that actually uses rail and road to get its transport around the country. But this is a national issue, so let's just take a look at a few facts and figures. It's worth pointing out, by the way, that even the facts and figures are up for debate. We've used the one to work out how much is used by the amount of freight carried according to according to its weight. Well, let's just see what happens when you run that through the computer. What you find is that 82% of freight is going by road, 7% is going through a pipeline, 6% by water, and just 4% by rail. Now, what does that mean for our roads? Well, we all know, really. It means that there are 426,000 lorries out there and 2.6 million light vans. And here's another figure. One train, it's reckoned, will take 50 lorries off the road. So plenty at stake on what's become an increasingly important environmental as well as business debate. It's a common enough sight on our roads. Lorries still carry the vast bulk of our freight. But how goods get from A to B is becoming an increasingly important political issue. In the last few weeks, newspapers have been full of adverts from some sections of industry calling for the most congested motorways to be widened. But there are also calls for more freight to be moved onto rail. The Potter Group is a transport company that has both sides of the argument. It has a fleet of lorries, but concentrates on using rail for freight. It's got 5 rail depots around the country, which feed into the national rail network. And goods are carried as far as possible by train before being taken onto lorries for their final destination. Around 5 train loads a day pass through the Selby site, for example, with goods ranging from paper to clothes and foodstuffs. Firms like this would play a key role in helping to get more products transported by rail. The industry already has a large chunk of bulk items like steel and coal, but now it wants to break into the market for carrying smaller amounts of goods. But it says that grants being cut back makes it even harder to persuade other industries to make the switch. Well, with me now is Derek Potter, who founded the Potter Group, and down in London in the studio we've got Richard Bowker, who's head of the Strategic Rail Authority. Now, Derek, if I can just come to you first of all, how important is the government help in getting freight onto rail?
The government are absolutely set their target through the SRA of increasing rail freight by 80%. A huge figure. Now, how are we going to achieve that? What has been done so far? And I think that looking at the traffic that's been run on rail is coal, aggregates, steel, those heavy products. We now have to get other types of products. Now that comes down to what is the assistance that the government can give. Let's look at the grants. The SRA have 3 types of grant. They have a freight facility grant, which helps provide rail lines, concrete and lifting equipment for transferring goods from road to rail. And they have a track access grant, which is paid to the rail operator on certain flows of traffic. But those grants have been suspended. There was no money at all during last year, and this year they've actually brought out a new scheme. They're hoping to review the freight facility grant and the track access grant, but the new scheme is called CNRS, which is Company Neutral Revenue Scheme.
And how much is that worth then?
£22.5 million.
And that's enough?
Well, it's not enough, because that is for taking containerised traffic onto rail to inland hubs. Of the £22.5 million, there is only £3 million for new traffic, because the existing traffic takes up most of the grant.
Well, let's just go across to Richard Bowker now. Now, Richard, we've just heard about the cuts in the grants and £22 million being available, but you've got this big target of an 80% increase. Are you going to be able to meet that with these kind of grants?
Well, can we just deal with the facts first? Actually, this company neutral scheme that Derek mentioned, our launch of that this year will mean that our support for those kind of grants this year compared to last year has actually gone up 40%, 40%. And actually rail freight is proving to be a major success. And the kind of traffic that's now coming back to railways is proving to be of very high value, and we're seeing a big resurgence in it. So I think the...
But what about What about this figure of 80%? Are you actually going to meet that, do you think?
Well, 80% is the target that we're aiming for, and we're seeing a lot of significant growth in new traffics. Derek mentioned the old kind of traffics that rail's always been good at, coal, aggregates and steel, and they still form a very, very large part of what's moved. But new traffics are coming, and the kind of business that the Potter Group have so successfully generated on their container traffic from Felixstowe to Selby, that's one example. Jaguar cars, Marks and Spencer, Safeway, Sainsbury's, they've all come onto rail in the last few years. We're seeing a resurgence in this market.
But Derek's point is £22 million still won't go very far, will it? Out of your overall rail budget, it's not really a lot.
Remember that 80% of all rail freight that's travelled, that uses the railways in Britain, does so without any form of support, any form of grant. So we're actually talking about a very successful market that doesn't rely on grant to function. Where we can make the case, we are keen to look at supporting it. As I say, the revenue grants that we're going to apply this year, 40% up from last year. We're spending billions of pounds on things like the West Coast Main Line, a lot of which is down to making sure that it's able to take new freight traffic. We're enhancing that, we're making the railway from Felixstowe through London bigger so that it can take the new bigger containers.
Richard, well,
millions of pounds being spent on making rail freight really work.
OK, Richard Banker, thanks very much. Let's just quickly come back to Derek for a reaction to that. Derek, do you think enough is being done?
I think the type of new traffic that Richard's referring to is not always train load traffic. You've got the customer who's got 50 loads a week, and he's got 10 loads going one direction, 5 in another, and 10 in another. And it relies on someone like the Potter Group as an aggregator to bring freight together. And I think we can certainly do that, but it will need help from government. I think it doesn't need a lot of help, but £22.5 million out of a budget of £2 billion. I know Richard is saying he will never have enough money, and he's quite right.
OK, Derek, well, obviously the message there is that there is still a lot that can be done, but still cash needed to make it be achieved.